In 1980, the Soviet Union had 5 million soldiers under arms. NATO had 4.9 million. On paper, the most dangerous standoff in human history was almost perfectly balanced. In reality, it was nothing of the sort. Here is the scenario. The Cold War turns hot in the summer of 1980. No nuclear weapons. Every alliance member fights. Every treaty obligation is honored. For NATO, the United States, West Germany, the United Kingdom, France, Italy, the Netherlands, Belgium, Denmark, Norway, Canada, Greece, and Turkey. Combined active personnel, approximately 4.9 million. Around 17,000 tanks, roughly 7,000 combat aircraft. For the Warsaw Pact, the Soviet Union, East Germany, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria. Combined active personnel, approximately 6.1 million. Over 26,000 tanks. Approximately 8,000 combat aircraft. 3 rules: no nuclear weapons. Either side reaches for them, the scenario ends. NATO fights from fixed defensive positions. The Soviets choose when and where the war starts. By 1980, both sides had spent 35 years preparing for exactly this battle. One had more of everything. The other had built a different kind of weapon entirely. This is what happens when they finally meet. Phase 1, the Central Front, Ground War, West Germany, days 1 to 14. NATO, US 7th Army, British Army of the Rhine, West German Bundeswehr, Belgian and Dutch Corps, Warsaw Pact, Soviet Group of Forces, East German NVA, Polish and Czech divisions, approximately 1.2 million troops. The Soviet plan had one objective: reach the Rhine within 14 days, not defeat NATO, not occupy Europe, reach the Rhine before American reinforcements crossed the Atlantic in sufficient numbers to stop them. Imagine the Battle of Kursk. 6,000 tanks on a single front, the largest armored engagement in history. Now compress that onto West German autobahns. The Warsaw Pact opens with approximately 15,000 tanks pushing west simultaneously across 3 army group axes. NATO's answer is not more tanks. It is precision. Tau missiles on helicopters, a 10 Thunderbolts built for one purpose: killing Soviet armor at low altitude. Each system designed around the assumption NATO would be outnumbered and needed to kill at range, fast, before Soviet numbers closed the distance. But here is what NATO missed: the second echelon. NATO's doctrine assumed destroying the first wave of Soviet armor would break the offensive. What intelligence underestimated was depth. For every tank division destroyed in the first 72 hours, 2 more were staged 50 miles behind it. The Soviets expected to lose their first echelon. They had built their entire offensive around absorbing that loss and continuing forward anyway. By day 4, NATO anti-armor systems have destroyed an estimated 3,000 to 4,000 Warsaw Pact vehicles. The line holds, but it is not breaking the offensive, it is slowing it. On day 6, East German NVA units find a 12-mile gap between US V Corps and West German II Corps near Fulda. 3 divisions push through before NATO closes the breach. For 18 hours, Soviet armor operates 30 miles inside West Germany with no defensive line ahead of it. The gap is sealed. NATO losses, days 1 to 14, 800 to 1,200 tanks, 18,000 to 28,000 killed. Warsaw Pact losses, 4,500 to 6,000 armored vehicles, 55,000 to 80,000 killed. The line holds. The Rhine is still 180 miles away, and the Soviets have not committed their second echelon. Phase 2, the air war in the Atlantic. NATO, USAF, RAF, Luftwaffe, French Armée de l'Air, carrier air wings. Warsaw, Soviet frontal aviation, Soviet naval aviation, 8,000 combat aircraft. NATO's air doctrine rested on 2 assumptions. F-15S and F-16S were generationally superior to MiG-21ES and MiG-23S, and NATO air power could interdict Soviet supply lines fast enough to starve the ground offensive before it broke through. The first assumption was correct, the second was not. Imagine the Berlin airlift, 200,000 flights over 15 months to supply one city. Now reverse it. NATO aircraft cutting supply lines feeding 1.2 million troops across 400 miles of Eastern European road network. Soviet logistics columns dispersed, concealed, and moved at night. Every bridge NATO destroyed had a pontoon replacement within 48 hours. In the air, F-15S achieved roughly a 3-to-1 kill ratio against MiG-23S. The Soviet Air Force accepts losses that would ground any Western air arm and keeps flying. It is not designed to win air superiority. It is designed to survive long enough to support the ground advance, but here is what NATO's air planners missed: the Atlantic. Reforger, NATO's reinforcement plan, required shipping approximately 500,000 US troops from American ports to European docks within 30 days. Soviet submarines, 375 boats at Cold War strength, fan across the North Atlantic. They are not fighting a naval battle. They are slowing a convoy. These are the submarines your father's generation spent 35 years hunting. In the summer of 1980, 60 of them are in the North Atlantic with orders to find the ships. NATO ASW forces sink an estimated 35 to 45 Soviet submarines in 30 days, but the remaining boats delay 2 full Reforger convoys by an average of 11 days each. The 82nd Airborne arrives by air on schedule. The heavy armor does not. NATO air losses: 400 to 600 aircraft. Warsaw Pact air losses: 900 to 1,400. Reforger delivery rate: 65% of planned tonnage on schedule. NATO wins the air war. Phase 3. The breaking point: days 15 to 45. All NATO members, all Warsaw Pact members, every front simultaneously. By day 15, the war has spread beyond West Germany. Norway is under Soviet pressure from the Kola Peninsula. Turkey's eastern frontier is engaged from the Caucasus. Greece faces Bulgarian and Soviet forces along its northern border. NATO is fighting 6 simultaneous battles with a command structure designed for peacetime consensus. France, not integrated into NATO's military command since 1966, is fighting its own war on its own timeline. French forces do not fall under Saussure. Coordinating French artillery with West German defensive lines requires diplomatic negotiations in real time while Soviet armor is moving. A counterattack that needed to happen in 12 hours takes 36. But here is what the Warsaw Pact missed: its own alliance. Polish forces on the northern axis slow their advance on day 19, not from NATO resistance, but from logistics failures and, according to later Soviet internal documents, deliberate foot-dragging by Polish commanders, unconvinced they were fighting a war worth winning. Romania refuses full commitment outside Romanian territory. The Warsaw Pact on paper has 6.1 million soldiers. In the field on day 30, it has effective control of perhaps 60% of them. These are the soldiers who spent 35 years being told they were defending socialism. Some believed it, many did not. That distinction matters when the order comes to cross into West Germany. By day 45, the front has stabilized approximately 80 miles inside West Germany. The Soviets have taken Hamburg. They have not reached the Rhine. Reforger is now at full capacity. Neither side is winning. Both sides are bleeding at a rate without historical parallel since 1945. NATO losses, days 15 to 45, 35,000 to 50,000 killed, 1,800 additional armored vehicles. Warsaw Pact losses, 90,000 to 130,000 killed, 5,000 additional vehicles. Final verdict. Phase 1. The Central Front held, but at a cost of 18,000 to 28,000 NATO dead in 14 days, and the Soviet second echelon had not yet moved. Phase 2. NATO won the air war and kept the Atlantic open, but Reforger arrived at 65% and every delay shaped the ground battle that followed. Phase 3. The front stabilized 80 miles inside West Germany. Hamburg fell. The Rhine did not. Total NATO dead, between 55,000 and 80,000. Total Warsaw Pact dead, between 150,000 and 215,000. Neither number includes civilians on the West German territory where the war was actually fought. That estimate begins at 200,000 and has no credible ceiling. Here is what this scenario actually teaches, and it is not what either side's war planners admitted publicly. The NATO-Warsaw Pact balance in 1980 was not a military problem. It was a political one. The Soviets could not count on Poland. NATO could not coordinate France. The Warsaw Pact had 26,000 tanks and could not guarantee half would move on schedule. NATO had 7,000 aircraft and spent 36 hours negotiating artillery coordinates. Every wargame run by both sides in the 1970s reached the same classified conclusion. A conventional war in Europe would not end in military victory. It would end in exhaustion, in a front line somewhere in West Germany, and in pressure from both governments' populations to stop before the casualties became politically unsurvivable. The nuclear arsenals were never the only thing preventing this war. The math of a conventional conflict was nearly as terrifying. Both sides knew it. Neither said it publicly. That silence was, in its own way, the most powerful deterrent of all.